So, Pauline, we made it,
Yes.
and welcome everybody who is live here in this Zoom meeting, and those who are checking us out on the Planetiers website. It is a great honor to be here, and Pauline and I have prepared a very interactive presentation. To showcase how we work together and to give you an example and experience how I approach systems thinking and how we can apply that to business. The workshop for today is called Combining Physics, Biology and Green Chemistry to develop new business models in harmony with nature. And that's of course in collaboration with the Planetiers World Gathering. I've been asked by the organization to share my insights, how I approach and solve challenges by merging ecological thinking with economic doing. And during this workshop, we'll discover the relevance and importance of connecting natural science with business economics. And Pauline and I will share our experiences, how we are shifting minds in education with students, and also how we're doing that with business leaders. My name is Alexander Prinsen, and together with Pauline, we will be hosting this workshop. A short background about us. We met each other in 2018. That's a long time ago, Pauline, already. During an excursion where we were showing students the future of horticulture in the west of Netherlands. And there we connected on the importance to bridge ecological thinking with economic doing. And I just came back from a world travel, meeting leading entrepreneurs and learning about their business models. And Pauline was doing her own discovery. So please introduce yourself also, Pauline.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm also incredibly honored to be here at the webinar on combining physics, biology, and green chemistry to develop new business models in harmony with nature. Yeah. Alexander and I met several years ago, just by really good luck, and we start talking. We were, traveling to one greenhouse to another greenhouse, and we just, started to discover how many aspects we have in common. I love physics, I love biology, I love green chemistry, and I love how to create a new future, and that is where our crossroads entered. And we travel since 4, maybe 5 years already together on how to start and how to create another curriculum at Bachelor University of Applied Sciences at Van Hol to influence the new generation to create another future.
Yeah, and to give. Thank you, Pauline. To share a little bit of what I do with my company, Scope Matters. It's a system approach where by firstly understanding natural science, we can actually move from there to innovation and to new business models. And if you break down ecological thinking, and you know that the word eco means the planet, then it's a type of logical thinking which we need to connect to economic doing, which is basically bookkeeping. So it's the natural bookkeeping. And how can we use physics, biology, and green chemistry to create regenerative solutions which improve biodiversity, improve the access to water, and also improve entrepreneurship by creating more business models. The deeper layer is that if you do that in that way, you will actually achieve lower unit cost for your company. You would generate more cash flows. eliminate any waste or emissions or pollution generated from your company, and on the long run it will create resilience. And basically that's it. And for the innovation pathways, all challenges at the moment are finding better materials which are circular, bio-based, and hopefully can even degrade or put that into closed loop circles. We need to find ways to make agriculture profitable again and regenerative. Energy, we go to decarbonization, but also seeking out new options of producing and storing energy. And on the other side, the blue part is the technology we choose, the products we will and want to design, and then at the end, the type of business models which come from there. And because of the collaboration with Van Hal-Laderstein, we set up a miner, or we recreated a miner which already existed. And maybe it's good for you, Pauline, to explain what it is, what we're doing in the miner, and what kind of impact we're having there.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. The impact we have, we wish and we hope to inspire young people who will, within 5 to 10 years after graduation, become business leaders or managers in larger multi-companies, to be aware that they have a pioneer function to somehow rethink systems, to somehow start with. And what we early on already decided, Alexander and I, to reshape current thinking, how to design a curriculum, how to teach and how to learn young people. We really wish from the beginning on to have our students a application and knowledge on system thinking. That is quite unusual when I talk to fellow teachers and managers active in education systems, that we are so used to have building blocks in different types of things. And then after 4, maybe 5 years, the students are responsible to connect that. And we say in our minor, we don't do that. We start immediately how all the building blocks are connected and how all aspects from a nature point of view, how all aspects from people point of view, how all aspects from nature point of view are related to each other. And at the end, in about half a year, our students end up with the building blocks they are used to in early education. But by then, they know to ask the right questions. Alexander.
Yeah, and the big change what we're doing in this minor is actually combining 3 different aspects. One of them is innovation, innovative mindset. We introduce systems thinking, and we coach them on leadership skills, person development skills. Because what we're seeing is, once you start to feel the logic from physics, biology, and green chemistry, the reality sometimes is more stubborn than we're used to. To transform that in leadership is that the heart and the mind become challenged. The heart understands it, but the mind has been framed in such a way that it finds it hard to accept a new framework, which is logic from the heart, but rationally it defines all the way we look at our economic system and how we are trained as students, or basically also from a societal point of view. And in those 4 months, I'm teaching 8 weeks for 3 hours mostly on the green topics, how you can look at a certain way of implementing physics, biology, and chemistry in a systems view, to solve the business challenges. So we look from input and outputs into the whole sector. And when you look at the underlying framework before you can get there, we discover that the circular economy, sustainability, and corporate and social responsibility and governance are completely three different silos. Other people will know them as people, planet, profit, for instance. But if you're looking at systemic innovation and regenerative solutions for how we want to create better business models which help our planet, you need to integrate these three together. And what you see is that corporate social responsibility is mostly put down at marketing. Sustainability is marketing from a sustainable environmental point of view, and circular economy is more business development, the CEO topics. And systemic innovation or systems thinking will only work when you integrate these three together. And that becomes obvious once you go through the process of systems thinking. And what we do with our students, and what I also do when I collaborate with business, is to set up a complete value chain where all the inputs and outputs are connected, and where you find appropriate technology in between to transform the outputs into new inputs. To give you an example, to become very pragmatic, for instance, this is a pig farm which has 1,000 pigs instead of a big farm which has, let's say, 10,000 pigs. This system is as profitable as a linear industrial farming system. Why is this system more profitable? Because all the inputs and outputs are connected to each other. For those who are more technical and are curious, you will discover there is a biodigester for energy generation. You will discover that there are fungi, there are earthworm for the composting process. You will find a fish farm, algae, and I most likely forget also some other ones. And the logic behind these kind of images is that we bring back bacteria, fungi, algae, plants, and animals back into the system, because from a natural transformation perspective, we need all these 5 kingdoms to cascade nutrients through the system. And if the cascading is not working, we have an output which is not connected. And that is, it seems very logic in the essence. However, if you do this for your company, you will discover that actually there are also multiple routes to find solutions in a certain area. For instance, Pauline, we are doing a project with the students together with the University of Groningen on PHA, for instance.
Yes, that's correct. Since about 3 years now, we run together with University of Groningen with the biotechnology department and research to somehow create a new system, or of course redesign a current system. Think about PHA, which is an ingredient to create bioplastics. Plastics on itself is so valuable for our economy. We use it for wrapping, we use it for cars, we use it, and so on and so on. But we have created for ourselves a linear economy that uses fossil fuel to create plastics, and then we waste it. By somehow redesign your system, you are able to biocascade ingredients taken from nature, use the design, how nature works, to create a cycle of again and again input output of all kinds of materials in which we as humankind uses bioplastics which are biodegradable. We're still struggling. But that's the fun of doing research together with students, together with the University of Groningen, and together with Alexander Prinsen.
Yeah, what we discovered in that project also is that the research done is still in a very linear way. To produce PHA, you need a certain input. Bacteria, membranes become the PHA, and the whole process is purely focused on making the concentration of membranes as big as possible. And yet, the wasted outputs is still significant in that process. And what we have done together with the team is to look, okay, the primary process is to produce the PHA, but what kind of other waste materials are coming out of that fermentation process, and what kind of applications can we find for that process? Because then you will also have multiple cash flows out of your waste process in the PHA, and then suddenly you will have a lower unit cost, and eventually, if you do it full scale, you can actually start competing with the fossil fuel plastics. And that was already a paradigm shift for the research team we were working with. And if you bring everything back to the essence, we discover, basically you will discover that there are multiple questions we need to ask constantly on what it is that we're working on. And for that, I have created a very pragmatic schematic where on the you start always with the inputs, which are green, and you always have outputs which are blue, and in the middle is, let's say, the factory. And interesting enough, in red are let's say the macro questions every company has. Is like, how can I improve my production system towards a circular, or how can I turn my supply chain into a circular system? How can I find circular innovation solutions, or even how can I integrate sustainability, circular economy, and CSR all together to the bottom line? And the biggest challenge at the moment for everybody working in the circular innovation space is that you have to deal with materials which need to be changed. We need to have regenerative inputs. We need to be smarter with our water consumption. We need to have different energy solutions. And the same is with emissions. How can we turn emissions into cash flows? I mean, everybody is saying CO2 is a big problem. However, CO2 is actually a feedstock for bacteria and algae to produce biomass, which we can cascade into, let's say, plastics or pharmaceutical products. So instead of framing environmental problems as a problem or an issue, you could also look, okay, I have an output flow, what can I do with it, and how can I generate more value out of it? To give you a very practical insight, the dairy industry, to produce milk, that milk in itself is only 30% of the total output of what a cow produces. And the question would be, what is the other 70%? Actually, that is just the manure of a cow, and manure is not seen as a potential cash flow for the farmer. As we spoke, for instance, about PHA, manure could be an input to produce bioplastics. So then the question becomes, what is the main business model of a dairy farmer? Is that to produce manure? Because it's 70% of the total volume, and manure can be upcycled towards higher, let's say, higher prices based on the volume, or will you only produce milk and accept that you have a huge environmental problem with your waste stream? To make things concrete, Pauline and I decided to make a small systemic design challenges with all the participants joining. My question to you would be now, what kind of business model would you be interested for us to talk through with you? So you can raise your hand and then we can open up the microphone just to have a business case which Pauline and I can dive into.
Yeah. This is a kind of an exercise we also do in classroom as a first introduction to our students in system thinking. We ask them, just yell out a product you're proud of. Please, what is the product you are proud of? What is the product you sell? Let's start with that one. The first one.
You can also put it in the chat box where we will pick it up. Is there anybody who wants a practical case that we can dive into it to show you the way how we work?
Anyone, please. Otherwise, I got a suggestion, Alexander.
Yeah.
At this moment, I'm tutoring a student who just completed. Oh, okay. Yes, thank you. Tetra Pak packaging. All right. Is that okay, Alexander?
Yeah. Yeah. So then, let's say, then we just need a small description of what Tetra Pak is doing. For those who do not know who Tetra Pak is. Alexandra, could you share us either in the chat box or we can, you're already unmuted, so please share with us.
Well, hi. Thank you. This is going to be exciting. Well, Tetra Pak is becoming more and more widely used, and I can understand it's probably optimal for the conservation of the goods, the milk, the juices, the wine even, which is to me is a sin.
Yeah.
But then it goes to waste. It's so difficult to separate the layers of the Tetra Pak that it goes to waste, and its use is ever increasing. You know, how can we deal with that?
Yeah, so the Tetra Pak it's a packaging material.
Yeah,
so,
that it has layers of carton,
yeah,
aluminum, and something else that I don't remember.
Yes, it's something like.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I'm going to increase my speed now. So it's paper, it's layered paper, aluminium, and mostly some other.
Yeah, foil or plastic type of protecting.
Foil. Okay.
Yeah.
And Alexandra, you're talking in a way that the waste stream is an issue.
The waste stream, I imagine the waste stream of the manufacturing is large, but also the waste of the packaging itself. It's used for dairy beverages, cheese, ice cream, prepared food. Now I'm Wikipedia. It's the largest food packaging company in the world. Tetra Pak is the brand, but there's also other companies manufacturing this kind of packaging.
Yeah. So my starting point will be, okay, it requires paper. So basically, it requires a forest. It requires cellulose. And then cellulose, I assume for, in this case, Tetra Pak comes from wood. And wood comes from a forest. So the more packaging we use, the more forests we cut. And the forest is directly connected to the soil. So this is one step. And then we have sort of to become cellulose, we have the paper, let's say the paper mill. And that produces cellulose, and that becomes the paper we need. The biggest question you could ask yourself also is, why do we need paper for our food packaging? Because paper and carton are sort of the same type of things. But if you know that from cellulose, we know, for instance, that bacteria can produce very similar cellulistic characteristics as paper. But we also know that the mycelium of fungi can do the same. So you could, so to approach this problem, Alexander, as you mentioned, you could either look at, okay, look at the output issues from an environmental perspective, or we can look, okay, but is there also a way to change the input material we're using for our food packaging? Because then suddenly the whole packaging, let's say, what is it? What is it called in Dutch? It's called pak, but I don't know what it's called in English. But let's say the bottle, the paper bottle. When you change the starting material, you will most also likely change the waste stream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Alexander, to support you,
Yeah.
I am a food technologist, so I do know something about packaging. You just imagine yourself, this cup, you know, it might contain coffee or water or so on. It always has certain type of layers. Tetra Pak packaging in general, from a food storage but also food shelf life point of view, you need some kind of a packaging that is combined with a certain volume you buy as a customer. So thinking from the product functionality point of view, why do we need packaging to contain liquids? And some point in history, we have decided to have a certain type of layering to create, yeah, the ceiling or the wall to contain a certain amount of liquid. So another question we not only asked from an input point of view, but also from a product functionality point of view. Why do you need those layering?
Yeah.
And that question is related to the output as waste stream. Please, Alexander, continue.
Layers, yeah. That will define the material you use to produce these layers.
Yes, and sorry, in Tetra Pak, I just checked, the layers are different kinds of plastic.
So it's
4 or 5 different kinds of plastic.
okay. So they made the choice, and I assume for the moment these are plastics which are fossil based.
I can confirm that, yes.
Yes, they are all fossil based, yeah.
So if you would be a company like Tetra Pak, and I know they have many challenges to solve their environmental impact, the moment we know when you have plastics in storage containers, we know that for instance, the plastic becomes nano particles. So this actually gets into our food system, let's say the human food system, because any plastic that it's free to float. I know, at least for plastic bottles, but there is a big challenge whether or not gets into human digestive systems. And then the question then becomes, okay, why are you using cellulose? Why are you using aluminium? Why are you using plastics? Put into a food liquid storage, which has a certain shelf time before it comes to the consumer. And you mentioned that because you're using layers, which these needs to be broken down or at least extracted. Peeled off. It does impose a big challenge for the conventional waste disposal system. So basically, ideally, you will have you would need a factory for these packaging material to break them down. Let's say I'm free floating for the moment on inspiration.
Yeah, and by the way, this factory doesn't exist, and that is so fascinating. Yeah. So
this factory doesn't exist because it's not cost effective.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking of, based on the knowledge we have collected in the past years together with our students on compostable, biodegradable plastics, if you just, the first step could be think about this layering. There is an important functionality to have a certain type of packaging. The first step to think what change could be possible. What about replacing this plastic layer with something else that has a limited durability, which is compostable? So basically you can create a type of fermentation process after, when you create your waste stream, and then suddenly something different will start in, we call it innovation, we call it rethinking, we call it, let's change how we think, let's change, somehow integrate with nature, with biology, with physics, with green chemistry. Then you start to come up with interesting, and that is something I really enjoy working with my students. Once they got that as a method of thinking, a method of rethinking, then suddenly their minds break open. They come up with all kinds of new innovative products. They come up with all kinds of new innovative processes. They come up with all kinds of new business opportunity, with new business modeling, and that is fascinating, because once you know how microorganisms do their work, how plants are to microorganisms, and how animals, and in the end, of course, we people need our food and store food, then suddenly you see a new system appearing. Please, Alexander.
Well, you're doing it very well, Pauline.
Yeah.
It helps me to do the image, and you just adding my mind to the image, which is very, very fascinating how fast you have learned in those 3 years.
Yeah, thank you. So I might be an example of, it takes time to learn. I sometimes observe that in our students, like a little light bulb, and then suddenly the light comes on. And what I see after about several years now, it never stops, the minds of our students.
Yeah, and what you're mentioning, Pauline, is actually where the magic happens. If for instance, a company like Tetra Pak starts to look at compostable plastics, then they become part of the biotechnology industry. And if that produces enough PHA, they suddenly have the plastics which they can use in their own packaging. But because the fermentation steps in between produce CO2, which you can use for algae to produce more bioplastics if you want, or to use the CO2 for biofuels if you want to power the factory or the trucks, or use the CO2 for synthetic fuels or even plastics. Suddenly the whole factory starts to produce additional products which you can use in your primary process. This way of thinking is not easy when you're used to a industry where you focus primarily on your primary product flow, which is in this case packaging. Once you see that your company is part of a very bigger ecosystem, you suddenly see that your own outputs are inputs for another industry of which you can use the products in themselves. And in this way of thinking, you can build up a complete new ecosystem of material flows, which now are from make to waste, but then become circular because every step in between produces material you can use for your own material flow.
Yeah, and by the way, Alexander, when I think about what other layers are there still, it's paper carton, which is basically food for the microorganisms on itself. So it's fascinating. Yeah. Of course, you have to use biodegradable ink and paint, yeah. But then you are really close to redesign your system.
Yeah, true. And then you can also question where do you get your paper from? Is it still cellulose from woods, or can you find new biological materials which have the properties of paper but come from a different feedstock? And I see we were requested to slow down and move forward to a more to close down this workshop around 10:50, 10:55. So I hope to have shown you, together with Pauline, the way we approach the generic innovation challenges by moving back into the value chain all the way to where the molecules originate from. However, also all the way to where the material moves after use, and how with an innovative mindset we can create new industries which turn these waste flows into new materials which eventually can come back to the industry in itself. And to go back to the presentation to conclude it, let's see, this is actually the question everybody is looking for. An astronaut floating in space, and each of us on this planet is seeking for the circular manual of spaceship Earth, and the circular manual is actually observing nature and see how nature works and how the logic of our natural system already provides all the answers we need. To give you a small insight, even the spacesuit of this astronaut is full of microbes, viruses, and fungi, because these microorganisms actually live on our body, in our body, and actually control also the human species, because without microorganisms, humans would not exist in the first place. And the natural world contains all these solutions. Our biggest challenge is to look into nature and study these transformation steps and then translate that back into the appropriate technology. I have a website that's called the Masters of Beautiful Achievements. It's a blog, it's a podcast. I've showcased already 5 cases I've studied in more detail, where I connect the agricultural system together with the, let's say, biochemistry system. And you will discover that there is so much value, biodiversity still to be created by us as a human species, that it will provide all the food, all the water, basically all the nutrients we need. It's highly detailed, it's full in content. So if you want to know more about what I do, please visit this website, look at the cases, and then if you want to know more, come back to me, and then we can see what we can do for you. And as a last step, Bookmans Fuller, he was a polymath living in the USA. He was an architect, he was a physicist, and I don't know what more, but he had a really nice quote, and he said, "We will never change things by fighting the existing systems of reality." So if we want to change something, we need to make a new systems model, a new economic model, which makes the existing one obsolete. And ideally, we need to find a way to lower the prices so that these new economic models can be more competitive than the existing linear ones. And based on my experience and all the coaching I do with companies, I can tell you it is possible. However, it requires redefining the way we look at physics, biology, and green chemistry, and translate that into appropriate business model, which has a much higher value creation than we are used to, and especially how MBAs are being taught at our business schools. Once you get that, unit cost will go beyond your own imagination. And then I always have an example of a greenhouse here in the Netherlands. If they start to produce tomatoes pharmaceutical grade, it will imply that at least 40% of the tomatoes can be given away to citizens because they have earned their money already on the other 60%. And then we will start having a paradigm shift, food becoming cheap and companies earning the money they need. And then I sort of have to conclude with a big thank you to all of you who have taken time to join us on this very small, short, and intense workshop. Pauline and I can be reached on these email addresses. If you have a question, hopefully we have some more minutes where we can answer them, either in the chat box or raise your hands, and then we can unmute you to see if there is something about how this small workshop, how you perceived it and what your feedback is. So hopefully the Planetiers will give us some moments to have a short feedback round with you as a NTD here in the Zoom meeting. So is there somebody who wants to raise a question?
Alexander, do you see the chat coming around now?
Yeah.
On cosmetic, a question on cosmetics.
I'm in the cosmetic industry. It's very important to stimulate the new entrepreneurs to create from scratch sustainable and robust businesses. Focus more in ingredients in cosmetic, interior packaging, still most. Yes, I totally agree with you, Anna. The biggest challenge also is to have packaging which also contributes, in this case, as you're framing it, which is contributing to the ecological system and not just for the marketing purposes. And for my experience in marketing and design, they have the biggest challenge to move away from a packaging which makes a product upselling easier, but also to find ways to have the packaging itself to contribute to the ecology. Either it's compostable or it can be repurposed or even reused. There are many ways and many opportunities still left in that space. And also for the cosmetic ingredients, there is also a huge space for them at the moment to find ingredients which have a positive ecological value and come from natural resources instead of the petrochemical industry. So there is much space to do there. One question from Alexandra.
Can we do like one last question and
yes, yes.
Finish? Just to tell everybody that's online with us to thank, and
yes,
we're gonna upload this workshop like in the next couple of days, so we can always get back and watch it again and take notes. And today it's very easy to get in contact, I hope, with both of you and make questions. So thank you so much. I'll give you just one more minute and then I'll have to to close.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the time management.
Sure.
Alexandra has a very good question, which actually is a good to conclude with. How do you see the role of public policy to help convince industries want to change, make them include externalities in the cost? Alexandra, the question is very easy to answer. The reality is more a bumpy road. If you can have lower unit costs because your externalities produce more cash flows, industry will change their way of doing. And the biggest challenge is to convince industry that they actually have more business opportunities left in plain sight, which they can still increase the value of the company, but also increase return on investment towards their own investors. And the importance in order to see that route is to look at systems, introduce a way of logical thinking and translate that into a new economic reality with completely different business models. And public policy follows the leaders of the industry who are showing that these business models actually exist. So it's a two-way road.
Alexander, please. Yeah. And you know, also my role at education is slow down, please. We have to wrap up, Alexander.
Yeah,
thank you so much. Really, I really enjoyed watching you. To everybody that was with us, this is going to be uploaded in planetiers.com quite in the next few days. Please watch it again and contact the speakers in case you have more doubts or you want to say something. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.